James Bond is a liar. Seriously, forget everything you've seen in the movies. Real spies don't shoot lasers from their watches, they use something far weirder. Like this umbrella. On the outside, it looks like just another umbrella, maybe something you'd carry along on a rainy day. But for KGB spies during the Cold War, it was a weapon. At the very tip of it is a hidden gun that actually shoots a tiny pellet containing poison, known as ricin. It's so subtle that you might think a bug just bit you, but a few days later, it's game over. Pretty scary that something so dangerous can be hidden in plain sight. Still, this is nowhere near as bad as the KGB makeup trick. Yeah, the KGB didn't just use accessories. Back in the 1960s, they created something called the lipstick pistol. It looked exactly like a tube of lipstick you'd find in a purse, but instead of making your lips look red, it fired a single bullet. Funnily enough, the spies called it the kiss of death. It was the perfect disguise, because no one would suspect that touching your makeup was actually dangerous. I guess that takes intimacy to a whole new level. But not everyone would get away with carrying lipstick, so the CIA came up with something for the men. I'm talking a small tool everyone carries that's a little more professional, like the fountain pen gun. This was a classic spy weapon, looking just like your typical fancy ink pen to sign important papers. Yet on the inside, it held a small bullet. And since many people love clicking their pen, it wouldn't seem strange for someone to do this with a fountain pen gun. The only difference is that clicking this pen fired a small projectile that could cause some serious damage, proving that the pen is mightier than the sword. Fortunately, killing someone isn't always the solution, and maybe you just want to listen to their conversations. That is where we once again catch up with the CIA, and one of the most ridiculous ideas in history. This time, they used a cat in something called Operation Acoustic Kitty. The CIA believed they could turn a living cat into a microphone, putting batteries and a transmitter inside. The cat would wander near bad guys and record their conversations. But do you think cats listen? No. The project failed horribly though when a taxi drove over the cat. So when animals failed, the CIA tried using insects instead. Well, robot insects. They actually built a dragonfly, but it wasn't real. It was just a tiny drone that looked like one with green wings and a small engine. Like the cat, they planned to fly it into a room and everyone would just think it was a dragonfly. As good as it was, its biggest weakness was a strong breeze, blowing it away like a leaf from an autumn tree. But if flying robots don't scare you, what about exploding rocks? I'm talking about the coal torpedo. It traces its origins back to the Civil War, but even in later wars, spies took hollow iron balls and painted them to look exactly like lumps of coal. They snuck this coal onto trains and steamships, and when the workers shoveled the coal into the fire to power the engine, kaboom! The heat made it explode and destroy the engine. A clever but messy way to stop a train. But you don't always need to stop trains, and firing a single bullet is not enough. And this brings me to Operation Briefcase. Now, it looks like a normal leather briefcase that any businessman would carry to a meeting, but inside, it held a machine gun, an MP5 to be more specific. The crazy part is you didn't even have to open it. There was a trigger mounted on the handle, so a spy could walk down a street, press the button, and the gun would fire. I'm sure it will increase the art of bargaining. So, while we're on the topic now of weird places to hide things, let's take a look at the rectal toolkit. Alright, it is exactly what it sounds like, and it helped capture CIA operatives during the Cold War. The kit had a small capsule for drill bits, a knife, and saw blades. But the catch was the hiding spot. They had to literally shove it up the back. It sounds funny, I know, even ridiculous, but imagine being locked in a jail cell. I mean, this could be your only method of escape. Just make sure to wash your hands after using it. And speaking of messy things, let's go ahead and talk about the dog do transmitter. Yes, you did hear that right. During the Vietnam War, the American military created a radio beacon that looked like a pile of dog poop. And since nobody touches poop, it was a pretty safe hiding spot and was placed along trails to listen for enemy footsteps or trucks. I bet this job was probably left for the recruits. At least the next one is a bit cleaner. I'm talking about the Sedgley glove gun deployed by the US Navy. Now, what made this one so special is that it was stylish and something that nobody would expect. The design had a thick glove worn on the hand, but instead of just keeping you warm, it had a pistol attached to the back of it. To fire, the spy had to punch the person they were fighting, so at least they knew that each time they got into a fistfight, they'd win. But it was a little clunky to carry around all day, so the British came up with something even better. Imagine a bicycle pump that fires bullets. That is exactly what the well rod pistol is. It was designed to be super quiet, almost silent. Spies used it when they had to take out a guard without waking up the base. It wasn't the most stylish weapon, but it proves you don't always need to look cool to be effective. The well rod has always been used in various movies, showing off how effective it truly was. But let's face it, carrying a weapon is not always the best solution. Sometimes you want your weapon to be even better disguised. And I'm talking about the real smoking gun, a pipe full of tobacco that could fire a bullet. It sounds crazy, I know, but the British once again came up with this invention. It fired a .22 caliber round and would be smoked like a normal pipe even when loaded. Just imagine a professor sitting on a park bench puffing. Suddenly, pop! It was the perfect weapon because nobody finds smoking a pipe suspicious. Now, speaking of smoking, the CIA didn't like Fidel Castro that much, and they tried every possible way to get rid of him, even something as crazy as an exploding cigar. Yes, the plan was to slip a cigar filled with explosives into his supply, and once he lit it, boom! It sounds like a cartoon prank, something that Bugs Bunny would do to Elmer, but they were serious about it. It didn't work, but I do need to mention that they also tried to make his beard fall out with special powder. It just proves that even spies can be petty sometimes. Now, the CIA is creative, but no one compares to the Mossad. One of their craziest inventions actually happened just recently. The Mossad spent years feeding their enemy pagers, but instead of just pagers, they were laced with explosives. One day, Mossad simply gave a signal, and in one fell swoop, the pagers exploded. Even more, they did the exact same thing with walkie-talkies just a few days later. But this wasn't the first instance. Back in 1996, they did it with a cell phone, and when the target answered, boom! It takes the meaning of a dropped call to a whole new level. Now, let's go ahead and get back to something a little more non-lethal, used on both sides of the Cold War. This was the shoe transmitter. It wasn't fancy, just a radio transmitter placed in the heel of a shoe including a battery. And once the spy entered a meeting, they could record the entire conversation. But imagine you receive a new pair of shoes. Well, the CIA would add these transmitters to serve as trackers and keep an eye on their targets. Unfortunately, their biggest weakness was a simple puddle of water, ruining all the electronics inside. So, the shoe couldn't be used reliably to pass a message. The answer was the dead drop. Almost every intelligence agency in the world used this method. They found something common, like a rock or cement. It was hollow inside. Spies could place money, information, or gadgets inside and leave them in a park. It was very effective because no one would go picking up dirty rocks for fun. Now, I hear you, rocks are boring. I get it. So let's go ahead and talk about the Nazi and KGB belt buckle gun. Now, it looked like just any other shiny belt buckle that keeps your pants from falling off, but it had one very lethal weapon. In fact, it was so effective that even when a spy was caught with their hands up, they could simply push out their stomach and fire. It was a nasty surprise. Unfortunately, there are no accounts of it being effective though. It takes don't judge a book by its cover to a whole new level. But sometimes you do want things to look natural, and this is what the CIA realized. When they didn't want to leave a trace, they invented the heart attack gun. It's a simple dart gun that fires a small dart made of frozen poison and water. When it hit the target, the dart melted, and doctors wouldn't be able to find anything during the autopsy. This is what makes it the spookiest weapon ever. It was impossible to detect. Another cool weapon was a common piece of jewelry you'd find anyone wearing, the ring gun. Now, it was worn on the finger and actually held 5 or 6 tiny bullets. They weren't strong enough to kill someone, but imagine shaking hands with someone. It would certainly give you the advantage in a fight and cause some pain. Just another way spies turned everything into a weapon. Unfortunately though, this next one was a little clunky. Now, if you remember the film Taxi Driver, I'm sure you've seen the sleeve gun. It's the bigger cousin of the glove gun, attached to a sliding rail on the spy's arm. If they needed it, they shook their arm and the gun slid into their hand, but it was clumsy as hell. Just imagine greeting someone, and they shake your arm, only for the gun to fall onto the floor. I bet that's what you'd call an awkward moment. Well, at least the next weapon was a bit more reliable. With the Cold War, news was on everyone's mind, and the KGB realized how it could use newspapers. They invented a glass capsule that was rolled up into a newspaper. The agent simply walked up to the target, pointed the paper at their face, and pushed a trigger. It immediately sprayed untraceable toxic gas, usually cyanide. Once inhaled, the effect was immediate. This certainly took bad news to a completely new level. But it's not only the top spy agencies that used advanced weapons. Even North Korea has evolved. They call it the flashlight gun, and what makes it impressive is how it looks. Now, the weapon looks like a cheap plastic flashlight, often found in your kitchen drawer. But instead of a light bulb, there are 3 small holes for bullets. What makes this dangerous is that security doesn't ask any questions when they see a simple flashlight, a perfect reminder that in the world of spies, nothing is as it seems. But what about self-defense? Well, the Americans had figured out long before the CIA was born. Known as the OSS, they designed something called the thumb dagger. Now, it was barely the size of a coin and easily hid beneath the thumb. Many even sewed it into their coats. The weapon was usually made for self-defense, where an agent could slash their enemy by grabbing them. It might not have been deadly, but you can be sure it caused pain. Now let's take a look at some bigger explosives. I'm sure you've never heard of exploding chocolate. Well, this was precisely what the German intelligence tried to use during World War II. They actually made grenades small enough to be coated in chocolate. In one case, British intelligence uncovered a plot to assassinate Winston Churchill. They planned on giving him a bar of chocolate, and if he broke a piece, it would explode. Fortunately, the plan was foiled, but what if it could be replicated in the modern era? Even worse than this, though, is the cane gun, another weapon used by intelligence agencies all over the world. The cane gun is quite simple. It looks like a cane, but instead of being solid wood, it has a barrel inside. The bullet is loaded at the back, and a trigger is fitted with the handle. You see this one in so many movies, where a gentleman with his cane simply walks up to someone and fires. But the KGB took it even further. Remember the umbrella? Well, they laced the tips with poison, and just bumping into someone and piercing the skin could inject the poison. This is truly one of the scariest things you can imagine. But sometimes you need a tactical advantage. And this is yet another thing the Israelis came up with. To solve the problem of getting shot at, they created the corner shot. It's a special frame that holds a pistol. It has a hinge in the middle that bends around a corner. A small green screen shows the operator what they can't see, and by simply pulling the trigger, they fire. It's the ultimate cheat code for a gunfight around corners. And now, I've left the most dangerous of them all for last, and this is something many people might actually find hard to believe: the backpack nuke. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviets designed nuclear bombs small enough to fit inside a backpack. It was called SADM, which stands for Special Atomic Demolition Munitions. Special teams were created to install these weapons, even jumping from a plane and skiing down a mountain. It's scary to think that one man could carry a weapon powerful enough to level a city. At least no one tripped and fell. So which of these do you fear the most? Let me know down in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.